You don't tell anyone. Not your parents. Not your closest friend. Not the coworker 3 desks away who knows your lunch order and which podcasts you play when you're trying to focus. You don't tell anyone because you figured out something that took longer to understand than the investing itself. Showing wealth doesn't do what people expect it to do. It doesn't generate respect. It doesn't deepen connection. It generates something quieter and more persistent, and almost none of it works in your favor. That's the thing nobody explains when they talk about building money. The building is one skill, the silence is a different one entirely, and the silence might matter more. The number in your brokerage account is $287,000. You checked it this morning. You check it most mornings the same way you check the weather. Not from anxiety, from habit, information. Nothing to act on today. You closed the app. You made coffee in the same kitchen you've rented for 3 years. You got dressed in clothes that don't announce anything. Then you walked into work and your manager asked about the Tuesday report and your coworker asked if you'd seen the parking lot construction going in out back. The day began like every other day. The fluorescent light above your desk flickered. You opened your laptop. Nobody looked at you differently. That's not a coincidence. That's a choice you've been making for years. The decision to stay quiet isn't always easy. There are moments when the weight of it presses against your chest. Someone in your circle mentions their student loans. Another person talks about how they'll never be able to afford a house in this city. These conversations exist everywhere, threaded through nearly every social gathering. The natural impulse is to help, to share what you've learned, to say, here's the formula, here's what worked, you can do this too. But you've learned that offering unsolicited financial advice reads as arrogance. Offering it after people know your numbers reads as bragging. Offering it before they know sounds performative, like you're building up to a reveal. So you listen instead. You nod. You ask follow-up questions that demonstrate you're engaged without inserting yourself into the solution. That's a different skill than most people expect they'd need to develop. Here is what most people get wrong. They assume wealth changes how you move through the world in ways other people can see. A nicer car, a different watch, a restaurant where the prices stop making you do math in your head. And sometimes it does change those things, but the people who actually build something lasting tend to figure out early that visibility costs more than the item itself. Not just in money, in social texture, in the way people hold conversations with you, in the small recalibrations that happen behind other people's eyes once they know the number. The cost is real, it just doesn't show up on any receipt. It starts earlier than you expect. You are 23 years old, you have $2,400 in a checking account, not savings, checking. The account that exists to hold money from the moment funds land until the moment they're deployed. Your first real paycheck after taxes was $1,960. You remained in your parked vehicle outside your apartment and looked at the number for a long time. It wasn't large, but it had your name on it in a way that felt different than you expected. That evening you transferred $250 to a brokerage account. The screen confirmed the transfer. No animation, no message of congratulations. The system accepted your $250 the same way it accepts everything, without knowing who you are. You bought 2 shares of a total market index fund. The price per share was $94.40. You had $61.20 remaining in the brokerage account after the purchase. That evening you set up an automatic transfer, $250 every month, the day after payday. Then you closed the interface and maintained that distance for a full 2 weeks. Your friend group was at a rooftop bar on Friday. You said you were tired. You weren't tired. You were at home reading. The carpet was thin. The lamp was secondhand. The reading material was free. Nobody called that discipline because it didn't look like discipline. It looked like someone who didn't show up on Friday. The thing about that first decision is how small it felt at the time. $250. To someone making $1,960 per month before any expenses, that was roughly 13% of gross income. You didn't calculate it that way. You just knew you had to eat. You had to pay rent, utilities, and a phone and gas for the car you'd bought, used at 20. There was a number left, after all of that. Not much, and you decided to move some of it somewhere you couldn't easily access. That small friction was the entire system. The impossibility of touching it meant the money could grow without being interrupted by the small emergencies that arrive every month. A tire pressure warning light, a friend's birthday, a meal with your parents that felt obligatory and necessary. All of those things took money that might have been invested. All of them would come again next month. The solution wasn't to earn more. Not yet. It was to make the investment automatic and harder to reach than the checking account it came from. Your coworker Marcus mentioned a group trip in April. 4 people, split rental car. 2 nights somewhere warmer. He looked at you when he said not that expensive. You said you'd think about it. You didn't go. The math was simple. $620 in April wasn't $620. It was $620 compounding at roughly 9% annually for the next 35 years. You didn't explain this to Marcus. There's no version of that explanation that lands cleanly at 23 without sounding like you've confused a spreadsheet for a social life. So you said you'd think about it. He sent photos from the trip. The sky was orange at sunset. You liked the photo. You went back to the index fund. The hardest part of that period wasn't the saying no. It was the watching people you liked do the things you'd chosen not to do. There's a specific exhaustion that comes with being 23 and declining invitations month after month. Not the tiredness of missing out, though that exists. The tiredness of maintaining a lifestyle that nobody around you understands or respects. People your age are supposed to go on trips. They're supposed to try new restaurants. They're supposed to not keep meticulous spreadsheets tracking the difference between what they wanted to spend and what they actually spent. You were doing something countercultural without meaning to be countercultural about it. You were simply making different choices. The isolation that comes from different choices is harder to articulate than people think. Nobody noticed what you were building. At 23, it didn't look like anything yet. A checking account, a brokerage account with less than $600 in it, a person who didn't go on the April trip. That was all anyone could see. That was everything from the outside. 2 years passed quietly, without ceremony. The way early years of building always pass. You got a raise at 25, not a significant one. $3,800 a year before taxes, which arrived as roughly $245 extra per month after everything came out. You didn't change the apartment. You didn't upgrade anything visible. You raised the automatic transfer from $250 to $400. You adjusted the spreadsheet. You closed it. The spreadsheet is not exciting. That's why it works. By the morning of your 27th birthday, the account read $44,200. You checked it in the car before walking into work. Not from anxiety, from something quieter than that. A habit so automatic it no longer carried any emotional weight at all. At this point, something important had shifted in your mind without you having named it. The goal was no longer to reach a specific number. The goal was to make the reaching automatic. To build a system that required less willpower each month, because the willpower had already been engineered into the structure. You'd gone from thinking about money constantly to thinking about it almost not at all. The account would grow with or without your attention. That realization felt like arriving at a destination you hadn't consciously been moving toward. You'd simply followed a path and found yourself somewhere different. 3 months before that birthday, something shifted without your involvement. You opened your banking app to check a transfer and found a notification you hadn't requested. Your credit limit had moved from $3,500 to $8,200 overnight. Your account had been reviewed and updated based on your financial profile. You read that sentence twice. You hadn't changed jobs. Hadn't moved? Hadn't done anything a person could point to and say, there, that's the reason? But something in the system had recalibrated. Consistent deposits, low utilization, no missed payments, a growing balance. An algorithm somewhere looked at the pattern and quietly decided you were a different category than you'd been 14 months ago. You didn't need the credit. That wasn't the point. The point was that the system moved before you asked it to. A few weeks later, an email arrived from the bank. Not promotional. Those went automatically to a folder you never opened. This one came from a specific person, a name, a title, relationship banking specialist, a direct line, an invitation to discuss your goals at your convenience. The same institution that had declined your first credit application at 22 was now reaching out by name. Nothing about you had become publicly visible. No announcement, no change in how you dressed or where you ate or what you drove. The number had simply crossed a threshold the system recognized quietly, even if no one in your actual life did. Marcus asked about money again at lunch. Same table, same corner, same view of the parking lot. He put his phone face down the way people do when they want the conversation to be real. He asked what you were actually doing with your money. You told him the truth. Index fund, total market, expense ratio under 0.05%, automated transfer the day after payday, dividend reinvestment turned on. Don't sell when the market drops. Don't celebrate when it climbs. Let the thing run. He listened the way people listen when they expected something more complicated and aren't sure whether to be relieved or disappointed. He asked what the secret was. You told him there wasn't one. He didn't fully believe you. People want a door with a lock. They want to believe the reason they haven't built anything yet is because they're missing a key. You're not withholding anything. There is no key. He opened an account the following month and texted you a screenshot of his first $400 deposit. You wrote back 2 words. Keep going. You are 29 years old. The brokerage account reads $94,500. You still drive the same car. The one with the small crack along the lower corner of the windshield that hasn't grown since February. You still pack lunch 4 days a week. Same apartment. At work, your manager announces a structural change on the team. More responsibility, same title, no timeline on compensation adjustment. The kind of update that used to create something tight in your chest. The arithmetic of needing the job more than the job needed you. You sit in that meeting and feel something different this time, a calculation, clean and quiet and completely invisible to everyone else in the room. 3 months of full expenses sitting in a high-yield savings account earning 4.8%. You could leave carefully, the math would hold. You don't leave, you choose to stay. But choosing to stay and having to stay are not the same thing. You feel that gap clearly for the first time. It doesn't show on your face. Nobody in the room knows it's there. The freedom that gap represents is something you can't explain to anyone who hasn't built it. It's not the freedom to quit everything tomorrow, though you could. It's the freedom to have options. Real ones, not theoretical ones. When your manager starts pushing you harder, you don't panic. When the project scope expands without a timeline adjustment, you don't immediately surrender. You can afford to be thoughtful about how much you're willing to give. That was never true before. That's only true now. People around you begin noticing things they can't name. Not the money. They don't know about the money. They notice the absence of something. The low-grade financial tension that most people carry everywhere without realizing it. The tightness that shows up around certain conversations. The hesitation before certain decisions. The particular tiredness at the end of the month when the numbers didn't cooperate. That weight isn't in you anymore. And its absence is visible even when the reason isn't. Your friend group goes to dinner on a Saturday. Someone's birthday. Nicer restaurant than usual. The bill arrives and the table does the familiar arithmetic. Dividing and adjusting and calculating. You put your card down for your portion without looking at the total. Someone notices. They don't say anything, but you see them notice. A small recalibration behind the eyes. Nothing was said. Something was understood. Your friend Jamie earns more than you do. Nicer apartment, newer car, better wardrobe. She mentions the salary when it's relevant, which is more often than it strictly needs to be. She also has $14,000 in credit card debt spread across 3 cards and a practiced ability to not look directly at it. Jamie has never asked you about money directly, but over the past year, the texture of her conversation with you has changed. A slight edge that wasn't there before, a tendency to qualify things. She mentioned once, offhand, that some people are just lucky with timing. You didn't argue, you let it sit. Some conversations aren't worth what they'd cost to have. Your friend Theo bought a new car last spring, $47,000. He mentioned the monthly payment twice the week he got it. He mentioned the interior package once. He mentioned that the lease terms were actually very reasonable, which nobody had asked. That's what showing looks like. Not always a post. Not always a broadcast. Sometimes it's just the number inserted into the room before anyone thought to request it. Theo's net worth is probably negative, not because he earns poorly, because the visibility of the things he owns costs more each month than anything quietly building underneath. He's constructing an image. The image costs more than he realizes, and the image needs maintenance, which costs more the following year. Here is what showing your wealth actually does. It creates a version of you in other people's minds that you now have to maintain. Once they know the number, or the account, or the car, you become the person with those things. That version of you changes what people ask. It changes the assumptions underneath financial conversations. It shifts the texture of friendship in ways that are difficult to articulate, but very easy to feel. A friend who knows you have $300,000 saved will approach things differently than a friend who doesn't. Not because they're a bad person, because the information is there now, and people can't unknow things. The information reorganizes the relationship around itself whether anyone intends that or not. 2 months ago, your coworker Ryan made a joke at a group gathering about you probably having a spreadsheet for everything. Something about calculating the ROI on a birthday gift. People laughed. You laughed, but you filed it. These things accumulate. The jokes with a small edge underneath. The comments that arrive light but carry something heavier. None of it existed before people started noticing the absence of financial tension in you. All of it began the moment the information started to seep into the room. A card placed on the table before the bill was finished. A lunch skipped that everyone else attended. Small things, visible things. Each one a data point people store without knowing they're storing it. The bank called on a Thursday. Not an automated message. A person. His name was Daniel. Private client team. A calm, unhurried voice that suggested he made this call often and had learned exactly how much pressure to apply and how little. He said your account had been flagged for a complimentary portfolio review. The same institution that once sent a form letter about a $4 overdraft was now calling with a direct line. The variable that changed wasn't your character, wasn't your reliability, wasn't anything visible to anyone who knew you. It was the number. You scheduled the meeting out of curiosity, not need, better chairs, a folder with your name prepared before you arrived. Daniel asked about your goals and your timeline and your risk tolerance. You answered honestly and watched him recalibrate in real time. You already had a plan. The plan was working. He stopped selling. He started listening. That doesn't happen often in that room. You don't post about any of this. Not the account balance. Not the meeting with Daniel. Not the automatic transfers or the expense ratios. Or the morning you realized the low-grade financial anxiety you'd carried for years had simply stopped being present. None of it goes anywhere public. Not because you're hiding anything. Because you've watched what happens when people know. You've watched Theo. You've watched the shift with Jamie. You've watched the recalibrations happen in real time, across dinner tables, and parking lot conversations, and Tuesday lunches at the corner table. The information changes the room. Every time. Without exception. What you're protecting isn't just money, it's the version of your relationships that existed before the number entered them. So the car stays the same, the apartment stays the same, you pack lunch on Sundays for the week ahead, you check the account before the day begins, the number updated again last week, you put the phone face down on the seat, you went inside and started the day exactly the way it starts every other day. Your coworker asked if you wanted to split a lunch order. You said sure. The fluorescent light above your desk flickered the way it always does. You opened your laptop, and somewhere in the background, at a rate that requires no attention from you, at a rate that asks nothing of the room,